welcome to another episode of Aquarian Light, where we discuss cosmic threads and all things pertinent to the collective. Today's episode is called Cosmic Duality and the Orion Wars. We've been hearing requests for lots of different topics, and this one is a hot topic at the moment because not only is it something that people are curious about, maybe they want to know more about it, but also it pertains to the concept of duality that has been coming up again and again in communities, in people's personal spiritual lives, and on a cosmic scale as well. My name is Ruth, mystery student towards the awakening of consciousness.
And my name is Adonis. This is really such a fascinating topic, and it's really, I feel, with the last few episodes that we went through from the end of the old podcast into the start of this one, as well as we've shifted more into an esoteric energy, duality has been a theme that's come up quite a bit. We started with conscious willpower, and then the evil will that holds us into a dualistic mindset. And then we spoke about how this dualistic mindset can even permeate even as we start to work our way through esoteric schools, and that we truly need to break away from this specific perception more than any other perception if we are really to start to dissolve and free the consciousness from perception, right? Because there's two ways of looking at it. We can awaken the consciousness, but we could also free the consciousness, right? We could have objectively freed consciousness that starts to see things clearly, or we can awaken powers and consciousness without working on our internal perception, and then it will still be skewed and flawed and still see in the duality and the black and white of the matrix, because truly duality is a very important piece of the construct itself. So if we were to look at duality in its place in creation itself, it actually transcends outside of the matrix or the construct as we see it. It even goes beyond.
Call it Maya, right?
Yeah, right. I mean,
Illusion.
duality even is beyond the actual duality, just as it constructed, even goes beyond the causal level that we like to talk about in conscious willpower, this plane of will. It actually goes all the way to the basis and the fundamentals of how consciousness creates reality itself. When consciousness comes down outside of from the absolute, it unfolds into a trinity that is this is related in many religions, like the Holy Trinity. In Christianity, you have the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. We could look at ancient mythologies. You could have Ra, Osiris, Horus. These motifs that are really in every religion, every mythology, going back to the beginning of history. And what this points to is the truth of what creation is made out of, and that is a positive force, negative force, and then a neutral force that binds them together, creating matter, creating reality as we see it, right? So if we think about the atom, right? The atom is a proton, electrons, and then neutrons, right? Everything that exists is made of atoms, whether it's manufactured, whether it's natural, whatever it is. All of that, even that is perceptions of the construct, right? At its base, everything is consciousness, because the atom is consciousness. And the atom itself is made up of those three forces. So duality is necessary to create the construct, to create this matrix that we are in, so that consciousness, which we all are made of, can experience itself. That is what we're here to do, right? If we were to go all the way back up into the absolute, into the source, right? Then consciousness is in this void. It can't experience itself. right? It is nothingness. It's the unmanifested. There's nothing that's manifested. So it needs to manifest something for it to then fractal into all of these, however many, beings of light there are in this in the universe, right? And then experience itself from all these different perspectives, wearing all these different masks. So in that sense, duality is pivotal, is absolutely necessary to really existence, right? We all talk about oneness and everybody wants to return to the absolute, but in a sense, it's flawed to look at things as only oneness too, right? Okay, yes, sure, there is a collective consciousness, but that's also kind of a dualistic way of thinking of it. Oh, is it duality? Is it unity? Well, it's neither,
It's
because,
both. It's both
well,
and neither at the same
yeah,
time.
exactly. It's a multiple perfect unity, right? It's everyone is one, but also individual from the experience that is experienced when your individual fractal of light is sent down through the construct, and when it finally returns back up, it is learned through all of its experiences, but also at the same time is now connected to all of the knowledge in the universe. So you at the same time, one, have everybody's knowledge and memories, but then your own personal experience of how you experienced all of these things. So that's important, you go to note
Okay,
that.
so for someone who is just walking into the room now, and we wanted to quickly summarize what is duality in a nutshell, and why are we saying that people need to transcend it?
Well, duality is basically what everything around us is created out of, right? Everything is energy and matter, that fluctuates between these positive and negative poles, thus allowing us to create, right? Um, the reason we need to transcend duality is because it's our relationship with duality in this mental state, as we've gone over in prior episodes. It's our relationship with duality that is flawed and skewed. It's that we believe the duality to be reality, as opposed to a mechanism that helps us create what is around us. We don't see the third dimension, we don't see that binding force, and we see just the two dimensions as a fact, right? In a sense, we're living in this three-dimensional world, but because of the ego, because of these entities that keep us asleep, we actually think and process in two-dimensionally. And this stops us from being able to see the ego. This stops us from being able to remove ego, in a sense, since I think I also mentioned this in the last episode, but everything being made of consciousness has that trinity. The ego has a trinity as well. The trinity is, you have desire and aversion, a positive and negative pole, and then the neutral force that binds that is illusion itself. Until you see the illusion, then you think that, it's things outside of you that cause these shifts back between something good happening to something bad happening to you, even the perception of things being good and bad, and not being able to understand that these are just the natural fluctuations of the system, so that it can create itself for you to live in and express yourself.
So what does life look like for someone who has detached? I'm just pretending that I don't know.
I feel you. I mean, what does it look like? I mean, you mean like an actual visual aesthetic,
Oh,
or
no. Okay.
like,
So for example, how I experience things. Um, First of all, I'm not saying, oh, I'm 100% detached. I'm still here in the physical realm. But when your awareness is not grasping on matter, you don't really experience the human experience as a body. Okay, so the physical body is there, and you're aware that it can move in space-time, and you're aware of the energies that can come into the different centers in the physical body. But you are not necessarily thinking and feeling and acting as if you were that body. You know, there's a connection to it energetically. But let's say there are things that happen that to a typical person who's identified with the construct would be quite upsetting. They're far less upsetting because it doesn't feel as real. And it's important to make the distinction that this is not a kind of detachment that comes from depression or rejection of the world, because you're still very much here. You're very present in the here and now, but your awareness is expanded. And when it's expanded to a point that you can experience reality beyond the confines of the physical body, and you're not seeing this as a me, right? An individual identity. You have a kind of a connection to something greater, so you can feel your connection to the greater aspect of what consciousness is. When there's something challenging, whether financial, whether interpersonal, any kind of difficulty, really, challenges, they don't hit you in the same way as they would for a regular person where everything is the 3D reality. So would you say that's kind of how you experience it, or would you add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point there. I would say it's not that you said it's not the type of detachment. I would say what it is not dissociation. I think a lot of people assume that being detached is to be dissociated, to be like, just like completely like
Yeah,
out of the
that's the
body,
word
and
I
then I
was
don't
fishing
feel
for.
anything. I don't feel
Mhm.
anything. I don't, you know what I mean? Like out of the body, and it's just there, and like, I can't be harmed. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about more being disidentified um, from the concepts that bind us to the false reality. And yeah, it's like being able to see and feel your thoughts and emotions, that they're not you. Like, right, they're affecting you, you still feel them, but they're not you. So you can choose to not, associate with them. If someone says something that's upsetting, right, and it triggers, I guess you still have this ego within you, right, because they are separate entities from us, right? So somebody says something that's upsetting, when you're identified, you this low vibrational energy from this entity comes into your body, and you immediately identify with it. You start yelling at them or something, right? You don't even think about it. It's mechanical. It's you're not home. Nobody's there to drive the ship. The entity just comes in and takes over your body, right? When you're disidentified, somebody says something mean to you, and I mean, obviously, we all still have egos within us, right? Unless one is 100% light, right? Most of us have still a tremendous amount of egos, even. Uh, you can disidentify very early in the path if you really just come to that comprehension. It's not necessarily uh, a concept that's related specifically to how much consciousness you've awakened. That's more your, like, maybe like psychic abilities, all that stuff that's related to awakening consciousness. But the actual comprehension of dualism is just something that you have to come to a comprehension when you meditate on it. You maybe have to balance your energies, overcome your traumas and your fears, and just see that these things are not you. And you could do that at a pretty, I don't want to say novice, like you haven't done, like, have any, you need to have some depth to your work, but like pretty early on, I would say it can be accomplished, or it could like never be accomplished, and you could just work through dualism, and like I said, just start waking conscious through the ego, which will then actually make it harder to later on overcome these concepts, because what happens is the ego, when it's still able to be really the captain of our ship, it the ego can use our faculties if we allow it to. So, if we this is why it's so dangerous to awaken consciousness to the ego, because then we actually give energy to the ego, and now the ego can use these, like, maybe psychic faculties, and you see these people that become maybe like a cult leader or something like that. These are bad things, right? And the thing is one the farther you fall, so when you're more powerful and you have more of the ego, that's where we get these, like, the concept of like these, like, people doing these horrible things, because the ego looks to make its host suffer and then make others suffer. And if it has more power, then it can make a lot more people suffer. including the person that it is
Create
possessing.
psychosis, right? Like
Mhm. Yeah.
the egos are all different machines, if you will, all each with their own individual programs. And thank God they don't have as much power in the average person because the consciousness is so asleep. But when someone does specific practices that are public knowledge now in this day and age, and they awaken the consciousness, but they don't dissolve the ego, the danger is that all that light is taken by these little machines and they become like what's the movie where the men have the like the robot suit and I don't know. It's a kids
Uh,
movie. Is it Terminator? No, it's not. It's Transformers. That's the one. So it's like a
okay.
transformer, right? So they get an upgrade to the machinery. The guy inside is still this puny, silly thing, but the guy on the outside now has better weaponry, so he can do more damage. And someone who gains all this light and doesn't reduce the egos, then all of these egos have better weapons to do more damage. And so we start to see them behave in a psychotic manner. We've seen people where this has happened, and they become very strange, very irrational, and it tends to progress and worsen over time. So it's definitely something that if someone is wanting to engage in mystery practices, they need to have a proper understanding and orientation as to what it is they're getting into, because some of these practices are powerful. That's why they were a secret for so long.
Yeah, it's that's it. That is why they were a secret so long. Part of the issue that some of the practices is that if used in the wrong way, they can, instead of helping one destroy the ego, it actually will strengthen it. And the difference between, say, um, someone living in ignorance and doing things that, maybe don't help you awaken consciousness, they don't really also strengthen the ego, though. They kind of just stay stagnant. They're ignorant. They stay in the same place. But when we start to actually now add these practices and still have the ego, what we actually do is strengthen the ego. And as we've talked about, I think in prior episodes, what happens in that situation, and I've seen it actually happen multiple times, but we only have so much essence, give or take. I mean, some people may be born with more or less, depending on past lives and stuff, but we only have so much, like, probably somewhere under in the single digits of percentage compared to how much ego we have, right? So let's say, you have, I don't know, 3 to 7, 8% essence, right? Of this like soul, this fractal soul seed, right? And now you start strengthening the ego, and now the ego, it starts to gobble up more of that essence until finally it's like, you have like zero, and I mean that what then happens is that we get to a place where it's like you no longer have the ability in this incarnation to awaken the consciousness. And I don't say this to alarm people. I mean, look, there's plenty of motifs of like, you know things go back and forth. Duality exists in the superior realm. So like, just because someone is going towards demonic things at a certain point, I mean, demons become angels, angels become demons at the causal level. Some, these beings are one and the same, to be honest, right? Because they're balanced, and they may even do both things depending on whatever the task is from source at the time, right? But for every character that is a Darth Vader, they usually first fall very far and then they suffer a lot before the redemption. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to turn it around all of a sudden. It's usually you go all the way there, and then, the soul will then repent. So, um, yeah,
So what you're saying is that someone on this kind of a journey could follow the whole journey to become a demon and then do that for a while and then receive the instruction from higher up that now you're going to go the other way and then go all the way back the other way and become an angel.
that is absolutely true.
Yes.
And
Same
like,
cycle.
and that brings us actually more to our main theme. So the main theme we were actually here to talk about is actually just how duality plays out itself, right? Because as we said in the prior episode, the ego is not necessarily really evil. It's just a teacher, right? Or it's for us to have experiences and learn from. So maybe we fall into it to learn lessons this way, and then we get rid of it. And that's how the relationship's supposed to be on this planet. Our relationship tends to be a little bit, we're too identified with it as a like a civilization or the race. But the thing is with these dualistic things, right? Like so this is how creation works. And if we start to disidentify from that and we can actually like look at how these things play out, they play out, on all levels of the construct, right? So whether that's in a day of our lives or maybe a year or maybe a lifetime, or we see it over the span of a civilization, the planet itself, right? The races that live on the planet, um, you know, solar systems, galaxies, and even the universe, all these things play out. And I thought it'd be a fun topic to start to like look into how these things play out and how we can relate them, that the things that happen to us, maybe on a daily basis are even happening, cosmically on a grand scale for the entire universe itself. And it's really the same things. So I was going to share something that I've had personally from like internal experiences, uh, the astral plane, as well as probably the causal on this. I'll say yes. We'll say astral and causal experiences. And it has to do with an event that I believe is spoken a lot about in New Age spirituality. And also like, contact T circles and stuff, pseudoscience as well.
It's the same theme that's everywhere in different levels of subjectivity, right? Whether it's in New Age or in some modern mystery schools,
Mhm.
or even from remote viewers, they're
But this
all
is it's a
looking at the,
subjective story that
yeah.
is very, very popular and popularized, and that a lot of people view this subjectively. So there's a lot of like different information about it, but you may have heard of it before. Um, and that is the Orion Wars. Now, more than likely, what you've heard about the Orion Wars is very subjective and sensationalized, because most of the information that usually comes out of it, it comes from a lower level of understanding. There's a lot of people with spontaneous awakenings that connect to the alien stuff and things like that don't necessarily do the work, and they will be divined things, and through their lens and their subjective lens they see it in a much more intellectualized type of way. um
But for someone who's new to this topic, what would you tell them the Orion Wars is in 10
well
seconds? What?
that's what I was gonna say. So me personally, first of all, because of how abstract it is, I don't like to put a lot of details as much as of other things, and with like like dates and creatures and names and what this beings wear, and like they come from this planet, and this is how they live on their planet and all that. I don't really even try to dwell or connect lines like that when it comes to internal experiences. I just try to like really get down to um the intuitive, what's the message behind it, because everything really has like a universe, like I said, there's universal threads and everything. So when
But
you're
what's the
shown this,
subjective story though? Because that's probably what I meant by, before we reveal what it is at a higher level, if someone didn't know the
okay,
subjective story. Yes.
okay, I was gonna get to that, but there's, for me, okay, so there's many subjective stories. This is what I was getting through. There's many subjective stories. The most accurate, and I believe I've only person I've really heard that has actually also said this as well, is Theosophist by the name of Matthias Di Stefano. But and it's the same way that it came to me, so I trust that more because from my direct experience. And it's this, so it's a war event that takes place between, in the Orion constellation, over a portal that exists there, I believe near the Orion Nebula. And this portal is a means to break out of the universe and then thus, I guess, possibly like create another one. And the reason for the struggle is very similar to these themes that we're talking about, but you have the beings. So, and these are various species. It's not like a, you know, because sometimes it'd be like, oh, they'll say like there's these reptilians versus, you know, like the humanoid ones and they're fighting, or like the Thundercats, they have Lyrans or something, right? Like there's a lot of that going on. But from my understanding is it's not an exact like this race versus this race type of thing, but it's just a more of a beings that uh are trying to do internal work and return to source through awakening of the consciousness, thus becoming a universe themselves, be able to create a universe by following the internal path. And then beings of a lower vibrational idea or materialistic attachments that are, of course, are more intelligent than humans, but still identified with materialism and then technologically driven, and they want to, you know, take a machine into this portal and basically blow up the universe, blow out a whole lot of the universe, and then create their own universe that they're in control of, right? So that's the basic tenets of that. And the other thing is that the event is not actually some event in the past with that is like our secret history or something that's saying that, you know, our secret history is not the Bible, but really like Star Wars with Thundercats. That's also not exactly how I understand it, because basically, from my understanding, is when viewing this event, it is an alternate future or timeline, right? So in the astral or causal plane, even whatever, we're beyond space and time. So everything is now, including like the future and the past or whatever. So basically, this future timeline. So in this current now, where the universe is still expanding. So that we're in the, if the universe expands and contracts, let's say that that's consciousness going out to experience itself and then coming back, right? We're in the expansion phase. So at this point in time, there's still more beings in the universe that are still identified with unconsciousness or ego or whatever, right? So from my understanding is in this now, so right now, as we sit here, if you were to go to the future point, this war would happen in the universe would end. So therefore, the beings, before the war happens, beings that are of doing the inner work and want to just save the universe will come back to planets like this one and try to help, because planets have a soul as well. So helping the beings on the planet awakens the planets. The more planets awaken, awakens more of the universe, et cetera, et cetera. So they're back here on missions. So because they can move through time, so it's not, time's not linear for them. So they come back from that part to here, I guess, experience that a little bit, and then come back from that alternate future. And then basically, from my understanding, is this is an event that actually will never happen because that mission is successful, because we're still here. Because if that actually happened, right, the universe would be destroyed, but eternity all happens all right in the now, right? So if eternity is happening in the now, that means the universe has already expanded and contracted all right now.
Okay, so to summarize, what you have is this place called Orion. It's a constellation.
Yeah.
Okay, so the constellation of Orion, there's a portal, and beings of different vibrations fighting over it, because if you can get through the portal, you can create another universe. And the only way to save the bad guys from getting through the portal and destroying the universe is for the higher beings to come back in time, so to speak, just figuratively, okay, back in time to this point in time to help us awaken, because if we awaken, then the planet awakens, and planets have much more weight in the universe. So when the consciousness of more planets awaken, then we stop those lower level beings from
And
destroying
also,
the
as the
universe.
planets awaken, then the solar system's awaken. But all these things are levels, right? Even the solar system also is another octave of being higher. Like if like let's say the universe was one of us. Well, we are in a sense many universes, right? Like in a sense, it's like when you awaken, you become your own universe or whatever, you know. But like let's say that the universe is the guy walking around in New York City 2.0 at some higher octave, right? And like us at the very like at this like such a small delineation down from that, we're like atoms, right? In this body, like we're like the atoms, or we're like a proton, right? And then like the planet is like the whole molecule, and then like the solar system is a cell, and then like
Mhm.
the galaxy is an organ. You know what I mean? So like all of these things, but all of these things also have their own like being. Like I mean, obviously, like a high level soul that is unfathomably different to like what we have, but they have
Right.
their own being as well, right?
But it's the concept that the awakening that happens here, our awakening and the awakening of the planet, is going to prevent the destruction of the universe. And we know it's successful because if it failed,
Mm-hmm.
then we wouldn't be here. So that Orion Wars is kind of like peering through this kaleidoscope at a reality that does and doesn't happen
Yeah.
because it
Well,
does happen in a loop that then causes it to not happen.
the way well, the way I see it, if I interpret this right, and we did not get too involved in the subjectivity of like aliens and stuff. Like I said, I may see aliens, somebody else may see angels and demons, another person sees like machines that are keeping us trapped in a prison, right? At the end of the day, it's all the same thing, right? Because the filter that your person sees things when they have a spiritual experience, these beings are all formless. You know what I mean? Well, at least like you talk about like beings of light and some of these things, so they can really take. I don't even know if it's that they take the shape of what we want to see because they know what we would be comfortable seeing, or we just literally, because we can't comprehend their true form, create those forms. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really
Doesn't
matter.
matter.
Yeah,
But this
but
is an important point, right? That
hmm?
that subjectivity is here on this plane with how we experience the world, how we see our friends or our peers, people around us. We can be paranoid or we can think someone is trying to be mean to us, but it's not true because we're subjective. And in the same way, you can look at a light form and be fearful of it and project, oh, I saw a demon, I saw an alien, I saw a reptilian, and everyone sees something different depending on what is inside of them.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really fun though. So we're talking about what we're actually looking at. Now, so like I say that subjectivity aside, okay, so this person sees aliens. It doesn't matter. So let's throw that to the side. And then when we look at really what's going on in this instance and what are we really looking at, right? And in a sense, what we're seeing is, so we, as we just said, the universe expands, the universe contracts, right? There's the phase where there's more unconsciousness, and then there's a phase where there's less unconscious. What we're actually viewing in real time in the present right now, like I said, looking from a lens of a place where there's more unconscious people, because we're in the front end phase of this. We're looking at the 50-50 point in the universe when energy will finally come into balance and then reverse and go into the other direction. We're actually watching duality play out for the universe itself, represented by like I said, you have the beings that are working to awaken themselves and shift the balance back to the middle way to this balance and enlightenment. And then you have these beings that are attached to the material that are trying to keep things on the polar ends of opposite and trying to stay attached to the fantasy of whatever it is and trying to force their way to end objective reality for illusion, right? So
So what does that mean though, if we're at the 50% point, does that mean that it will become more or less polarized? Because this is a time where those who are awakening are working to become more awakened, and those who are choosing say a path that leads to destruction are choosing that path very forthrightly.
remember, right? It's we have to look at things multidimensionally. So when we're looking at it oh, good, bad, black, white. That seems like it's like, oh, it goes into balance and then we go back out of the balance into the other way. But that's not how it works, because truly, if we are righteous or we are evil, we are still ego. So if you go to the positive side or you go to the negative side, it all leads to more ego and eventually more suffering, right? We could be really, really righteous and then end up becoming like some type of like cult leader and we harm a lot of people, or we could just be a Satanist right off rip and harm a lot of people. But at the end of the day, we harm a lot of people. You know what I'm saying? So the ego is being out of balance, and awakening is being in balance. So if we reach a 50-50 point where half the universe now is in balance and it's enough that there's not enough of these to overpower that, but then we start moving back towards now more than half the universe is more balanced. It's not like that 75% pushes it to the positive. It just gets more and more and more balanced, because all of those beings are going to would be balanced. And like a master basically is like has both the positive and the negative fully in balance. So it's not 50% white versus black. It's balance versus being out of balance.
I see. That makes sense. So then we brought up the Orion Wars and the stage that we're in now. Great for people who like to look at things on a grand scale. But if we bring it back to the individual,
Well, that's
what
why
does it
that's
mean?
why it's so fun, right? So we can see that, right? We see that that's playing on the universe. That sounds like really crazy to all of us, like, and and even that these intelligent extraterrestrials that are, you know what I mean, whatever you want to call them, they're more advanced than us and all this, and they could still be trapped in technology and thinking you need to evolve and all of these things. And those are the types of people that are like the types of beings that are going to destroy the universe, right? And then now we can scale that back. Let's look at what's going on the planet today, right now, right? Let's look at what's going on the planet. We have, the division on the planet. Well, look at politics. What's politics? Whether you go to this side or you go to this side, everybody's out of balance, and the world is heading towards wars and destruction, and that's a long time coming. And then there's a destructive phase, and then another civilization is born, and these cycles go on and on. Like a civilization comes up, and then it goes out of whack, and then it's destroyed. And these happen for countries, go through these cycles, these dualism cycles. The world, the whole race and society, when you look back at things like Atlantis and like Lemuria, right? They all go through these cycles, and if they don't come to balance, then everything gets destroyed, right? And that's literally what we're seeing play out on a universal scale in the Orion Wars. But you could even then take it even more micro. You could look at you know, we can be in a group of people that are working on the esoteric work, right? And you have people working towards balance, and then there'll be the few that aren't doing the work, and then they start promoting the ego. And it's the same thing. They try to put pressure on this. It's like, well, as more people become balanced, then they get pushed out, they leave. But if they were able to keep more people out of balance, then things fall apart. But really, it's still that same dualistic thing that's playing out on the universal scale, on the country scale, on a global scale, on a whatever scale. Even in a daily life, you might go walking down the street, and then you run into somebody at the store and they're angry, and now you have to deal with this energy from somebody who's very mad, and you have to, are you going to stay balanced, or are you going to let that lower your vibrations? These dualistic things happen from moment to moment, and they also happen from eons to eons, and it happens over the course of eternity, because really everything is now.
So
So
would you say it's just the law of the pendulum?
yeah, that's what duality is. For creation to have for creation to be, for this subjective reality to be, there has to be that pendulum swinging, right? Otherwise, there's nothing. Like I said, there's nothing to experience. As we awaken, we find the balance. Then we experience the more objective forms of reality, all the way outside of the matrix, which begins at the causal plane. What to exist at the causal plane, to become a master. All right, I would argue that loose term, right? That just means that we've got it, because like you still would have ego, you wouldn't be 100% conscious at that point, but like to have that center of gravity in the sixth dimension, so that you're outside of eternity, right? So you're beyond eternity, like you're able to connect to that. that aspect of ourselves, because we all have that aspect. We all have this higher aspect that we can't get in contact with, but to achieve a level of consciousness that we now have a connection to that aspect at our will, right? And then we can go experience that plane as all the time
To
with
clarify for
memory.
those who are watching and don't know, a master can be at 50% consciousness, right? And anything up from there. So 50% means they still have 50% ego. And if they were 51, 52, we'd still call them a master. Masters don't necessarily go out and tell people they are masters as well. Just something interesting to note. There might be ones that have a mission to be public about it. And equally, there could be those who are private.
Most don't. That FYI, most don't.
Yeah, you wouldn't
The amount of
recognize it.
masters that are given a mission to come out and like be the leader of a religion are few and far between. They're also usually very special. They tend to be of a much higher degree. There's a sense of, we go through this process and then someone can achieve mastery and get to 100% consciousness, and they can leave and then send back their soul on another mission to, and then gain even more experience and gain even a higher degree of mastery by going through the construct again and again. Someone like Master Jesus apparently went through the construct 7 times. So those types of missions, like a Jesus Christ or Krishna or like the Buddha, usually these beings are like avatars of like an entire like civilization. They tend to have been through the construct like 3, 4, at least 5 times. Like they've gone down, they've gone to the hell realms or Avicii, whatever you want to call it, come back up through that. They've experienced this many times, and they have a lot of even more wisdom than what we would consider to be mastery. Because to us, mastery really is just someone who can connect to their divine source. We were talking about people that have cosmic, galactic wisdom on a scale hitherto unknown. You know what I mean? So, but yeah,
So
most people that have achieved that connection to divinity, that mastery, I think mastery is a better word than an actual master, but they've achieved some level of mastery of themselves, right? That's why we say that. If they're able to have a constant link to their being, regardless of how powerful that being is or how strong they are, they've now achieved some level of mastery over the mind, over the emotions of this vehicle that we can't control, even when disidentified, we can't control fully. Like I would say somebody who sometimes mastery has solid control on their emotions and thoughts and things like that.
So what do we say people should do, knowing this information and knowing, okay, this is how duality plays out. This is its connection to the Orion Wars. So just like a series of Russian dolls, it's the same theme on the macro scale and then in increments all the way down to the micro scale. I am a mini universe. I have the solar system inside of me. I have archetypes. I have archetypes I don't yet know how to conform to. I have all the astrology inside of me. And Ruth and Adonis have just spoken for however long, 40 minutes, about cosmic duality. And now I want to practically apply this. What is the practical application?
I think it's just important to observe. We get back to the fundamental tenet, right? We have to remember who and what we are, which is the same for all of us when we come to that realization. And we have to be able to then observe the false influences of these entities that are entrapping us by having us identify with duality, right? When we can see the duality for what it is, then it's much easier to understand everything for what it is, right? All of a sudden, you don't feel persecuted by the universe or attacked by demons just because, oh, well, something good happened to me yesterday. The universe sent me a check in the mail for, I don't know, a company owed me money from 5 years ago, and I just got $2,500. well then, oh, when I slip and bang my knee into the table tomorrow, I was like, it's not an attack or unlucky or anything. That's just, the cosmic scales balancing on a micro level because those things don't really matter that much. But maybe if, we are getting something with higher energy, there'll be usually the cost is evens out, right? And we start to notice these things. So, you know,
Can
if
help
you,
us with acceptance, right?
Mhm.
Like when you're building something big and you are creating at a higher octave, the breakthrough moment is going to have your biggest challenges because that's how you move to a new layer of reality. And if you're a quitter or you can't see the pattern that these are the challenges I need to overcome to move into that new octave, then you'll give up right at that moment. The darkest night is before dawn. You will give up and you will never see the dawn. You will never see the new creation.
Yeah, and it's also as long as we keep projecting these issues onto external external reality, right? But we keep blaming the duality of this is this bad thing happened because of that person, or this bad thing happened because of this job, or this bad thing happened because of it was raining outside. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, as long as we keep seeing that, not seeing that, no, these things happen because there's something within me that I'm not observing in myself that's causing these things to manifest. You know, we can be so trapped in illusion and pointing fingers. But really, they say when you point a finger, right, there's three pointing back at you every time, and almost always, right? No, actually, always, we are our own worst problem, right? Because even if someone is being difficult, right? Uh, because let's say you encounter somebody who's very dark and they're totally identified with ego and they do really nasty, mean things. They disrespect you openly in public. It's still not a problem if you don't let it affect you. If your perception is just like to have compassion for them, to understand that someone who is choosing to be that way is in a tremendous amount of pain. They are suffering. We realize that, because of duality, right? For us to be able to walk this path, for us to be able to awaken, that means that there has to be an equal number of people that the being for that person, sacrifices them down to this dark path. And yeah, sure, they get to experience the having like probably like a lot of power and fame. A lot of people that are famous do what we consider black magic, right? So that there's some benefits to that. Maybe they get a following, they'll be charismatic and all of this, they say the Antichrist is going to be very charismatic when it comes back. The Antichrist comes before the Christ and tricks all the people who aren't, aware of themselves. But actually it's really funny, right? Because everybody says they want to be light and everybody says that they're so good, but the truth is we're all so full of darkness that we almost all much when the light actually comes along, we don't like that. We like the darkness, we like the Antichrist.
Look at the masters, they never accepted them. Like Jesus Christ was
Yeah,
crucified and rejected by the people he came to give his message to.
yeah, but yeah, we need to be observing ourselves in those moments, right? Because we have to ask ourselves, like, what is it that's really causing the issue? Because if it's our perception, like I said, if somebody else is causing us a problem, well, what is it within us that is getting irritated or angry? Because like I said, even if they're, like I said, subjectively being, like, say, disrespectful, if I'm not identified with being mad when someone says something rude to me, then sure, they'll still be saying something rude to me, but I won't have a response to it. And I just understand that, well, that person is within their ego. I feel bad for them. And I appreciate them because they're there, first of all, to help me do my work. They're making a great sacrifice, even if they're unconsciously doing it, to allow me to do my work. And like I said, they're going through a lot of pain and suffering, and that's a noble thing. You know what I mean?
I also like how you mentioned the importance of for all of us who wish to awaken towards the light, someone equally has to awaken towards the dark. And this is the great mystery, that when we resist and we say, oh, I love good and I don't like evil, and when we're caught in that dualistic thinking, we don't understand that this is how all of creation works. This is how all of creation manifests. So for us to enjoy the light, someone else has to suffer in the dark, but it's not someone else, it's another aspect of us or consciousness.
Mhm.
And that's their beautiful gift that they give to those of us who go this way in this lifetime. And maybe the next time we do that for someone else.
Yeah. And that's why we can't, we shouldn't judge others, or get angry or whatever. That also doesn't mean that we should feel bad or let ourselves be manipulated, feel guilty, and let ourselves be walked over and taken advantage of either. But it's important to just understand where somebody's coming from and set. I know that it's a buzzword in New Age, but set boundaries. But it's true to an extent, right? I mean, we don't want to be an ego of setting boundaries, like, because that becomes then ego in itself. Like, oh, like, I don't resonate with that, so I was set a boundary. You're violating that. It's like, well, no, it's just you're being egoic and you don't like it. But to an extent where you're actually truly being nice and you're being compassionate, and you're trying to show humility, and someone is just yelling at you or basically cursing you out and stuff, and you don't respond, but then they keep trying to undermine you, and talking behind your back and try to paint this picture that, for example, you're attacking them, which in their reality, maybe you are attacking them. Maybe they believe that everything that you say is about them, because that's how the ego works. They might not even really be lying. Well, I mean, they're not telling the objective truth, but that's because they can't see the truth. And I always say that with pathological liars, really, our reality is as real as we make it, right? So I think we talked about that also in the last episode. But for when you're in low vibrations, these things are real because you identify them. That's why things like murder happen, right? A conscious being would never murder somebody because they understand that that's not even real. So there'd be no motivation to do that, because you wouldn't have bloodlust, you wouldn't have a control, whatever it is that drives somebody to kill, like anger or whatever. You wouldn't be identified with those things to even have the concept of doing that, right? These things only happen, these evil things only happen because people are identified with the ego. You know what I mean? So that's just like the way it has to be.
And also another really important point is what you said about when someone says something and you feel hurt by it, how the pain comes from you allowing it to cause you pain. A big part of that in the internalization process is the meaning that we assign to what was said. So for example, if one good example is, say, a child says to their parents, I hate you, and maybe they say some swear words. Now, what parent is going to seriously get offended by that when they know this is coming from a child and they don't really understand their emotions, they don't have experience with big emotions, they don't understand the situation, so they're coming from a place of ignorance and pain, and they're not very experienced to deal with it. So everything that they're saying doesn't hold water, and I'm not going to be offended by it because they don't really know what they're doing or what they're saying, right? So in the same way, when someone says something negative about you, you're the one that assigns a meaning to it to make it mean something that would offend you. It's like if someone swears at you or says something offensive in a language you don't understand, you don't get offended because you don't understand that language. So in the same way, anything that you feel hurt by comes from your own meaning making mechanisms or your own values that you assign to it yourself. And so really, when we choose to sit in pain and suffering because of how we think we're being treated in our own internal world, we're deciding to identify with pain. We're giving ourselves the pain, we're holding on to the pain, and we are giving up our power, essentially. We are becoming a victim by choice. And everything in these studies is the opposite of that. If we feel, so when we talk about self-observation, if we feel internally, say in the emotional center, a certain icky feeling, right? It's that feeling that feels so tight and tense, and it's like sometimes it's like, you know, you're getting stabbed with a knife. It's very bitter. It might feel sour, it might feel salty, whatever flavor you want to give it, it's a flavor, right? It's something that feels very uncomfortable and painful within. Now, that's the sign that an ego has come in. And when we disidentify, we can observe it and we can break free of it. But when we sit in it and feed it and wallow in it, then that's the hypnotic process has got us. And we can't get out until we can see, hey, wait, am I in pain? Am I mad? Am I upset? Okay, here's something to observe. Here's something to notice. What am I doing to create this inside of myself?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. I just, yeah, I think when it comes to that, it's really tough because when people are speaking from the ego, right? And you know, they say these negative things about you. It's like you said, it doesn't, if you really pay attention, the ego, I think I said this in prior episodes, but the ego is clever, not smart, right? And it really will, I mean, to use more common terms, they'll use things like defense mechanisms, like gaslighting, things like this. But if you're really conscious and aware of what's being said, not only is it usually the person describing what they're doing while they're attacking you, they also usually don't even, there's like a very clear, like, not non-understanding about the things that are even being said, because it's just the ego doesn't understand the concepts that will be being thrown around and about, right? It just wants to name call, so we'll use a lot of big words, try to be fancy, try to sound smart and intelligent, and really it just doesn't make sense when you really get down to it. It either doesn't make sense, or like I said, it's literally a self-description, it's gaslighting. But
It's kind of like,
but it's usually irrational if you really just
mhm.
get down to, like, if you don't take it personally, and you actually just detach back and then read some of the things that are said. It can be, and I don't want to be cruel, but it could be like a little bit absurd and amusing, in the sense of, like, it just doesn't make sense. It with
Well,
any,
all ego is like that, right? All ego
yeah.
is illusion, and it's not in objective reality. It doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And I thought of the example, you know, with the gaslighting, say a partner who is two-timing, right? And someone suspects something, so they try and call it out. And then what do? They point the finger and say, I think you're doing it. So then the other person thinks like, oh no, what, me? And then they get defensive, and really it's the one that's pointing the finger that is guilty, and they use that as a defense mechanism. And if it gets even worse, then the gaslighter believes it as well and goes, no, you really are doing it. And so then there's layers to this thing where, you know, we
That
get caught
that
on.
reminds me of, like, some of the boys I chilled with in college and stuff, like old friends, like people I don't, like, you know, long time, you know, you cut friends like that out of your life later on, but I do know the type, um that they're hyper jealous, but they're hyper jealous totally because they're the ones that normally do things, and then they become like possessive too, because they actually believe, like, that their guilt is being projected onto the other person, so
Right.
then they become possessive and then like super paranoid all the
And
time.
then they might drive the other person to do it as well, because if they
Yeah,
see it so many times, the other person's like, gee, you know, that's what you think of me. Okay. So
that's a good
basically,
example. That's a throwback. It's been a long time since I've actually hung out with a person like that. Obviously, we make a lot of changes in the company that we keep, um, once we grow, and that's not even a path thing. That's just like a human being thing as you age.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Hopefully you surround yourself with better people, but we tend to gravitate towards people of our similar understanding or intelligence as just, I think, just beings of consciousness. So another good way I think that you know, if we want to see how we're progressing, especially if we're on an esoteric path, but another good thing to look at is look around you and look at the company that you keep, and then maybe if you're trying to see like if you had any growth or regression, maybe look back a few months and look at the company you kept then, and meditate and observe on these things, because we like all these things, all this work is observing ourselves, right? Just staying present, staying in the moment, and observing ourselves. And we can learn so much by observing all the threads. Like, yeah, sure, we could also look at these cosmic threads, but when we go internally, we could also, from that perspective, that cosmic perspective, pull the threads on our own life, because in essence, like you said, we're a mini universe, so we are cosmic, right? So when you're connected to this like cosmic consciousness, you can pull the threads of your story, you know, and when you're that present and you're that aware and in that moment, you can see how everything is in now, everything that's happened in the past leading up to this point, everything that possibly could happen. You can semi predict the future. I don't want to make it sound like you can be completely prophetic, but like in the sense of you see future possibilities. You can see, well, this could go either this way or this might go this, maybe this will go this way. Then then do I make this decision or do I make that decision? Truly, the being probably has both of them faded for you, so it really doesn't matter what decision you make, because you'll get the lesson that you need anyway. But the point is there's at least that illusion of that when you're looking forward. I tend to not like to look forward though, because I like to just let things play out. It's not very present. It's looking back and seeing how it all led into the now is still being in the now. I think when we try to look forward, then we're taking ourselves out of the now, and it's not that productive. But that's just my personal opinion. There can be some useful to like just being prepared. You know what I mean? Like these things are possible. So like I should be careful now because I've seen these things may happen. Maybe also like if there's like some type of like more grand like danger event that's coming up in your future. Yes, maybe you might want to be like, oh, like, I don't know, there might be a war tomorrow. So like I should move, So I'm not saying it's a completely useless, but I tend to like the present and past. And not past like dwelling on the past, but just to watch how these things all come together, and there's a real beauty to it. There's always this like just perfect symphony from source, that everything fits together and draws together perfectly. And there's also this sense, usually if you're involved with a community of others that are like seekers at you'll see that everybody has these karmic ties, and everybody's like kind of going through, yes, their own thing. Then as well, there's this more like familial, maybe like school aspect that we're also going through. Like they'll be like everybody has their individual mission, but then there's like this greater mission, maybe with the group of this like this familial group. And then even on a more scale of that, then there's like this institutional mission that comes with another group of people that have been, maybe a bunch of these families are together. And then maybe on that, there's an even, larger thing that comes from like the entire like logo. So now I'm getting into big words, but like that's really cool as well. And we can kind of see how we all fit together, because we all really are, like I said, multiple perfect unities. So we're all pretty much getting that same thing in our unique way. Like it's how, I think I've said this before, but if I haven't, I'll say it again. Mission and purpose are two very important things. And basically the purpose is the same for all of us. Everybody has the same purpose. We are to awaken consciousness and return to source eventually, and get experience along the way. And once we start up that, we're supposed to bring as many people to that same path as well, or help them like get to the path, because they have to do the work for themselves, but like guide others that are interested. Obviously, you do not force people to pontificate. We're not going to walk around like Jehovah's Witnesses, but that's purpose though. That purpose is the same for everybody. But mission, that is the unique way that your individual higher self or being, or whatever you want to call it, that your inner master expresses purpose in the construct. So that's why when we talk about, people say, oh, everybody has a unique path. And sure, that's true. But also everybody's on the same path, because internally we all have a being, and their being has to go through the same initiation. So again, can't look at things black and white dualistically in that aspect. On a multi-dimensional level, both are true. We both all have a unique path, and all are also walking the same path. So getting attached to the idea that you have a unique path and nobody can tell you what to do and that you know better than everybody else, well, that is also the ego. That goes back to the episode we did on evil will. That is almost not only just the ego, but it is evil will posing as your God. It's the most dangerous ego, especially the students on the esoteric path, which we talked about that as well.
So when people are listening to that, they could think it's their being, think it's their higher self, and be following it and feeling that they're having understanding and experiences, but actually engaging in destructive behavior.
Well, that's what that's what the evil will does, right? It's represented by Caiaphas in the Bible. The Pharisee, right? Right, the Jewish priest who is not really not having spiritual experiences and jealous of Jesus, right? So it pretends like it's spiritual, right? But it really hates everything about the light and inverts our mind. It uses the willpower to invert everything, so that now we use our will to do everything that is for the ego and materialism, and we are through this skewed vision. We do everything that is like good for us and that will help us advance as what is evil. So we just continue to stay in the ego, stay in the ego, stay in the ego, and then act like we're listening to our being, and our being maybe will speak with us. Our being maybe will show us symbols. Maybe you know other people that are more advanced may give us information. We may get information from multiple people, all in different ways, and either we may get mad at them. For others, because we aren't mad at them, it goes over our head, but we are not listening to the being at all, and it's trapped, it's compartmentalized. That's what this does. It's like if you see the being, right, like as a child, right? I think they talk about this sometimes, the inner child, right? Like it's gonna be compartmentalized, right? We're not the being is innocent, yes, like a child, which is why that's a good way of looking at it. But also the being is full of wisdom and doesn't need to be protected. And this concept that we're protecting it is really the evil will. That's not our being. That's like, oh, I need protection. What it is the evil will saying, oh, go lock that being up, like lock that little baby up in the room in the crib over there, and listen to me instead. And it's a very dangerous ego, because how does one realize that they're not listening to God when they really think they're talking to God? Because the
That's
ego
what I was
is
going to
posing
ask.
as God.
What do people do to make sure that they don't fall into that trap? Because it's a test for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, my best advice would be to detach, because if one is still, to be completely honest, if one is still trapped in the illusion of duality, I don't know if you could see that illusion specifically. It's too, like, I don't know. I mean,
To wake up from.
yeah, because like, I mean, even now, right? Like we experience evil will, right? Like this is within in myself. I'll have if I talk to another experience, I had a experience recently in the astral where I was, going on astral. I think I was like working with a class of students or something came along where I ended up a one-on-one with one of the students, and they wanted to do something that was negative. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And I could feel, and like this was like in the astral experience, the evil will was within me, and it's like, dude, like almost like it was like there's like a robot or like a program in me. You know what I mean? Like I'm conscious and I don't want to do this, but there's like this other voice, and it was a willpower thing too. It wasn't the mind really. It's a little different than the mind. It's like it, but it's not, because thoughts are thoughts and thoughts are like chattery. And it wasn't that. It was like this like force in my body. It was like an evil double of me. Like, nah, you're gonna go be bad. And I was like, no. And then you just had to, and you have to resist it. And even then, and in that experience, I was able to resist it by using my actual willpower, but it took like willpower and force. It wasn't a like, stop thinking type of thing. It was like, here's this thing trying to will me in this direction, and I'm just like, no, you know? And yeah, I mean, like
Eventually has to be dissolved, right?
eventually, but I mean, you're talking about the actually to remove uh what we call esotericism, one of the three traitors. Like to fully dissolve your evil will doesn't happen until one is well into the stages of mastery. I mean, you will be a master for a very long time before you fully dissolve your evil will to where it doesn't exist anymore. No, that's something that we will have to deal with for a very long time. These like inner psychological songs and these inner deep things. We're not talking about like just like an entity we created. It's like the source of what creates the entities itself within us, which yes is also an entity, but it is much more powerful than just something we thought up of because we had some ice cream and now we like ice cream. You know what I mean? Like that's something
So
like
it's like here's a program, and here's a program that wrote that program, and here's the program that wrote
yeah,
that
basically,
program.
basically, yeah,
Which one are you going at?
basically.
Well, this has been such a good conversation. We've started with the subjective lore of the Orion Wars and how it's experienced by people in different stages of consciousness, what that has to do with the cosmos, and then how duality exists on every level, like Russian dolls, down from the macrocosmos to the microcosmos. And the individual is that microcosmos who is a mini universe and must detach and observe that this is the duality that creates nature, but it doesn't have to run the show when we move back into that awareness. And that detachment is the key for work on the esoteric path. It's also the key to a happy life for those who are not walking the path as well. I would say with a healthy amount of detachment and recognizing that all of creation comes or manifests through duality. So accepting that pendulum is going to swing between the positive and the negative, but staying centered in the middle, I think that's helpful for anyone. We've covered so many themes, and it's been a really awesome conversation. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I don't know. I think that's it. I'll just give the tagline. Just for everybody that's listening, remember to raise your frequency and maximize Dharma for the collective.
Be the change you want to see, be the light this world needs. You're listening to Aquarian Light, and we'll see you next time.